Welcome to Proclaiming Justice, a podcast from PJTN that focuses the light of truth on vital issues in today's headlines that impact every American. I'm your host, Laurie Cardoza-Moore, founder and president of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, and I'm here to educate, motivate, and activate you to action. I want to arm you with the truth and the facts you'll need to fight and preserve our constitutional republic and uphold the Judeo-Christian values our nation was founded upon. Welcome to Proclaiming Justice, a podcast from PJTN that focuses the light of biblical truth on vital issues from today's headlines that impact every American, Jew and Christian, people of faith, and people of conscience. I'm your host, Laurie Cardoza-Moore. On today's podcast, I have the distinct honor of interviewing one of the youngest survivors of the Holocaust, Barney Sidler. We are going to discuss his personal journey and the rise of the Nazis to power, and the silence of his neighbors while Jews were rounded up and led to concentration camps, and later slaughtered at the hands of evil, while the rest of the people stood by and watched. We will discuss why Christians were silent in that generation and our responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren against the rise of global antisemitism in ours. If you missed last week's podcast, you will find it in our previous podcast lineup on our website at pjtn.org. I also want to remind you to listen and share this and our previous podcasts with your family and friends so that they will become more informed about this and other related issues, to equip you to stand against the forces of evil by taking back local control of your community and your children's and grandchildren's education. Barney, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today about your experience in the Holocaust. So many years ago, so much has changed, but I'm really interested in hearing your personal journey, your personal story of what you experienced. You were a young boy when the camps, the concentration camps, were liberated.
When the war broke out, it was in 1939, I was 6.5 years old. I remember the Germans occupying the city. For the first 3 or 4 weeks, it started to get organized. After that, they requested all Jews show up at the marketplace for selection. The city I was born in, by the way, had 23,000 Polish people and about 10,000 Jewish people. So once we came to the marketplace, if you came in 5 minutes late, you were shot right in the spot. Okay? Then they had what it's called a selection program. It was locked. Or if you knew some good people, they would take every 10th person and send them to the left side of the thing. They had over 500 people that they put in cattle cars and deported them to Auschwitz, where they were exterminated 2 weeks later.
So you talked about they pointed people to the left. What's the significance of going to the left or to the right?
At my age, I didn't ask too many questions. My dad made a recipe, says, don't ask too many questions. So I didn't ask any questions. But, I know that as a fact. I remember it. My cousin's brother just passed away. He remembered. So, at that time, they transferred him all the way to Auschwitz. They dismissed the thing. 4 weeks later, the same thing happened, and they requested all Jews to go to the market square. And they took 100 Orthodox Jews. They took them to the temple. It was on a Friday. And they shot all of them with cluster bullets, beyond recognition. It was horrible. Couldn't recognize anybody, and they set the synagogue on fire.
Where were you when this was going on? Were you...
In the city, in the center of town.
And what was the name of the city?
The city is Demlin, which is a small city. You had 30,000 people. They had 20,000 Christians and 10,000 Jews. And my brother at that, I'm just going to tell you what I remember, because when my brother was 10 years older than me, so there was a big difference. He wanted to learn a trade, and my uncle was a tailor, but he says he can't teach him. Let him go to Warsaw and work over there. And he did. He took a train to Warsaw. When he got to Warsaw, Germans occupied Warsaw and started shooting. So he started to come back, but he could not find transportation. So he had walked all the way 47 kilometers back to our house. And we were surprised, and he said they were bombing Warsaw. There was nothing he could get to the place where he was supposed to go.
What happened in Poland didn't happen all of the sudden. There was a progress.
Yes.
And what do you remember? Because you were a young boy, share with us your experience leading up to, before they came into your city, before they rounded up the Jews and shot them and put them in the synagogue. Share with us what you remember as a young boy before this started to unfold.
I can remember exactly. They had a market square, and my mother had 3 sisters besides her, and each of them had a different store. Like we had a general store, like a Woolworth, something that. My other aunt, there were all 4 sisters at stores next to each other. The other one, sister, had a delicatessen, my third aunt had like Minnesota favorites. That's the easiest way I can describe because and my aunt, her husband was manufacturing jeans, working pants. I don't know if they were jeans, but that's the close I can come on jeans. And my aunt that had her husband was manufacturing jeans. They had a market on Wednesdays and Fridays. They had market days, so they go in the market and they sell it to different people. Right after that, they had a deportation center. So what they did is selected again people to eliminate as many as they can, and they requested that people come to the market. And they came, and my aunt, my uncle, and 2 daughters were sent to Auschwitz, including 1,000 other people that I can remember. But prior to that, I just got to tell you that my dad was a very influential person in the town. A lot of Gentiles respected him very much. They came for consultation. He was extremely learned. There's a tradition that the Moshe rabbi was the most famous rabbi in Poland, and he was a friend of my dad's. So he would come and say, and that I remember. I also remember when they called for, it's called a Appellplatz market. If people came late, they would take the children from the mother's arms and throw them against utility poles or trees to make sure they died. It was tragic.
Did you witness these? Were you an eyewitness to these events and these atrocities at that time?
I certainly was. I was eyewitness right along. I mean, I saw everything with my own eyes. Nobody told me stories. You got to remember, I was 6 and a half, closer to 7. So I wasn't a baby. I understood. But my dad was a very learned man. The Jews respected him. Even the Gentiles came to advice for him. So I remember that. Then after maybe 3 months, they decided to form a ghetto. Are you familiar with a ghetto? Where they came? So it took several blocks and said, okay, this block's all the Jews will stay here, and all the Gentiles move out, and the Jews move into there. And they had a ghetto. And the ghetto, the living conditions were harsh because they brought in a lot of people from different countries to our hometown, because our hometown was like 100 miles from Auschwitz. I remember like today that the Polish Jews were 100 per car. They brought in Jews from Belgium, from Holland, from France, and they had like maybe 25 people in a car. And we would say, because our camp was right by the railroad station, and we would go out and tell them we knew where the train was going to, Auschwitz. We told them, he said, no, the Germans said we're going to a summer camp. I said, you'll never get to see a summer camp. And they let them take furniture. The Polish Jews, they just went like they were cattle.
When these things were starting to unfold, surely you heard your parents discuss these things, maybe in private. Did they try to keep any of this information? When they started to see and hear the rumors, did they try to keep these things from you?
Did try to keep it private. Didn't want to do too much, talk about it too much. My mother did, my older sister did, my aunts, but basically, he kept that to himself. He knew what I was going through. He was an extremely learned person. And a lot of Christians came to him for advice or stuff like that. He wasn't an attorney, but he had the smarts.
That's amazing. A well-respected man. What happened to your parents? Tell us about what happened with your parents and your brother.
Once the Germans occupied our hometown, within 9 months, they said they formed a ghetto. And they said, this section where the Gentiles are living, I'm going to move to the section where the Jews were living. So they had a ghetto. They established a ghetto. So, and they had a Jewish police force thing, and they had a committee. My dad was part of the committee. Okay, and you can go out of the ghetto if you got permission from the committee and go into town. Let's say you had money, you could buy things on the black market. But if you came late, you were punished. You go in solitary confinement. It depends on what they had. If they had brought in illegal stuff, they bought stuff, they'd get going to jail for a few days and let them out again. And after things got a little more progressed, they eliminated the ghetto and formed a camp, a labor camp, okay, in our hometown. Our hometown was extremely important to the Poles and even more important to the Germans. Now, you just got to remember, as big as Poland was, the only other airport besides Warsaw was the military airport in our town. They had the military airport, and I still remember being as young as I was, it must have been 7, maybe 8 years old, that the Germans loaded the people in the camp, loaded German planes to go bomb the Warsaw ghetto.
This was during the uprising.
During the uprising.
And they launched the planes from that military base in your community.
Exactly. So that was tragic. We knew what was going on, but there's nothing we could do. So after that, they decided, after the ghetto, they decided to have a labor camp. They had 2 camps in our town. One was by the airport. We'd stay by the airport. Then they had by the railroad station. And by the one at the airport, our family was there, okay? And we were put into the camps, and they put the children and mothers together, and the men were in separate barracks. And then they assigned work to different people.
So is that what happened with your parents? Were they
working,
and then you and your brother? So there was you and your brother.
At me at 7, I was working for them. My job was sorting potatoes, okay, for the kitchen, because they had a major kitchen, one kitchen for the whole camp, and we had like 1,200, 1,400 people in the camp. See, so but the camp was. The camp leader was a Jew from Vienna. He was very good. He happened to have a good relationship with the German commandant. Okay, so he get little favors where he let people go into town. They got let's say they got a 4-hour pass or 3-hour pass. If you don't come back in time, they shoot you. Okay, so he had a very good relationship. My job was 7 years old. I was assigned to go sort potatoes in the kitchen. They had a kitchen. So whenever I went out there to work, I wore double pants. So I could steal potatoes, bring it from the kitchen to my mother, and she would supplement the food that we get. Okay. The other part was in Poland, was in our camp, a lot of people tried to escape and join the partisans. You know, you know what a partisan is, fighters. And they, some of them were successful, some of them weren't. And the Germans would come in and get a count of how many people are still there, how many left. If they found out, I mean, they counted, they knew. If there were 10 people missing, they would shoot 10 people. At random. They wouldn't, it didn't matter. Yeah. My brother tried to escape. He was 14 years older than me, so it was a big difference. And he got caught. They took him by horse and buggy, to go to the town square, where all the Polacks were there, to execute him. He ran away, ran into a church, and the Polish priest hit him in a casket for 4 days. 4 days later, he showed up in camp under an assumed name of a person that died a day before. He couldn't go under his own name.
Is that how he survived before going to Auschwitz?
He was not known as a Sidler. He was known by the other guy's name, the guy that passed away. Yeah, so and we were in camp for about 3 years. Toward the end, the Russians started occupying. They transferred camp. They transferred the children. First 80 children were transferred to another town, also a labor camp, in Częstochowa. Częstochowa happened to be the holiest city in Poland. That's where the Black Madonna is supposed to be.
Oh, yes. I've seen videos about that. Catholics travel from all over the world.
In Częstochowa was the town where the Black Madonna was. So they transferred 80 kids from our camp. And again, they picked at random, but my dad had he was influential, very learned. A lot of Gentiles, I still remember as a kid that he had Gentiles come to the house for advice. Okay? So they took the children and shipped them by train, about 80 kids, 60, 80 kids, I don't remember off today. And they shipped them to the next camp. When they arrived in Częstochowa, I mean, if you talk to Polish people, Częstochowa is the holiest of the holy things. When they arrived at camp, the camp commander killed all the kids and buried them in a mass grave.
Oh, my God.
The word got out, they got back to our camp.
What did the Catholic Church do? The Catholic Church should have had a major church, a bishop that would have resided over that city?
The holiest
Right.
city in Poland.
Where was the Catholic Church?
I don't know. You know, I hate to tell you, but the Polacks were just as bad as the Germans, even before the war.
I remember reading about the little Polish town called Jedwabne, where 1,600 Jews, by their own neighbors in this community, these are neighbors that they lived with, that they worked with, their children played together, and they turned their back on the Jews and rounded up all the Jews in the city, put them in their synagogue, and set the synagogue on fire, men, women, and children.
Oh, that same thing happened in my town. You know, it was not any difference in any of the Polish towns. In any towns in Poland, the anti-Semitism was, you could learn it even before the Germans occupied Germany. Don't buy by Zed is Jew in Polish. Don't buy this. Big signs, you know.
So they were already boycotting Jewish businesses in Poland before the Germans even got there.
Oh, yes. In 1938, you know, I was still 6 years old, so nothing.
Tell our audience about your experience.
We were in labor camps. So from our hometown, when they liquidated, because the Russians were coming in, so they liquidated the camps and transferred all the people to different camps. I was transferred to Buchenwald with my dad and my brother.
Where did your mother go?
He was in camp with us in Buchenwald. Okay. And that was like 44, you know, the end of 44. We got to Buchenwald. They told us to get out of the trains, take off all our clothes. Everyone, there were maybe 600 people, but you know, only 60 or 70 got into the shower. We all thought we were going to be gassed when they give us showers and uniforms. We said, thank God.
Yes.
Thank God.
Amen.
Okay. And then they assigned us to different barracks. Okay. I was fortunate. I was a child, so they had a children's block, what they call. So all the children would stay in those blocks in camp. And that's why I told you, I had a bunk on the second bunk. There were two bunks. And the first bunk was Eli Wiesel. I didn't know this until I went back to Buchenwald. And she told me that, Barney, you are the youngest child liberated in Buchenwald. You're 12 years old.
So you were 12 when you were liberated?
12 and a half. When I was liberated. And we were liberated, when we got liberated in Buchenwald, the American troops that liberated Eisenhower's Fifth Army, they threw up, they cried because they found over 6,000 Jewish people, and there were all kinds of people on stacks, dead. They didn't have time to burn them. Now, Buchenwald was an extremely big camp. It was divided into 3 different camps. You had the Jews, they had the Jews and gypsies. They put them in the same thing. Then they had the political prisoners, and they had the prisoners of war. And every day you would go. Weimar was the next city, which was like maybe 12 miles, 10 miles. They would take you to the city, let's say, 3,000 or 5,000 people go to work. When you walked out of Buchenwald, the music would play, band would play. And you go to a market square, and let's say people would come and say, I need 3 workers, I need 5 workers, and they give it to you. Okay? And they will respond. The people you went to work for were responsible for you. And if something happened, you had to wait till they found the person that was missing. Now, some of the Germans tried to be nice. They give you some bread, but you couldn't bring anything in, because if you brought something in, that was the end of you. And there are many Jews that didn't make it back, you know. And I know, still remember like it was yesterday, it was toward the, maybe March of 45. They took 8,000 people and only, they missed 8 people. We stayed till 2 a.m. in sub-zero weather till they found the people. They found 2 people that had died. Okay? Then they released everybody. So it was a tragic thing to see. I happened to be fortunate. God must have watched over me. Okay? I befriended a German doctor who was in prison since 1936 because he was anti-Hitler. He was a political prisoner.
Wow.
And he would come into the barracks and examine the people. Mm-hmm. So he talked to me, you know, and I don't know if you know that, but you probably do. The German and Jewish the German language is somehow related to Jewish.
The Yiddish,
yes.
Yeah, Yiddish. Oh, yeah.
So, you know, so and he says, he will take care of me. And because I resembled his son, and he took a liking to me very much. And he came over and took me out of my barrack, took me to his house. Not a house, a barrack, but he had a private barrack. He said, you stay here because they're going to take out a lot of Jews and kill them. And he hid, and I just want you to know, I'll never forget this, that he hid me in a laundry basket and put towels and dirty clothes over it. And the Germans came in and said, haben Sie eine Juden? Do you have any Jews? He says, no. So they left. Then they let me out when things settled down, you know. And we were there, and I'll, you know, as young as I was, certain things you can't forget. I remember they wrote in 6,000 Jews from Hungary. And, you know, the Jews thought that within 2 weeks, they eliminated all close to 20,000. Okay? But the most important thing that I tell you, which was really amazing, when we finally got liberated by Eisenhower's Fifth Army, the soldiers would come in the camp, they'd cry, they'd throw up, they couldn't watch the piles of people that the Germans didn't have time to bury or burn. Gas chamber. They had a gas chamber in Buchenwald. They had 4, but they only burned the bodies. They didn't take live people. But like I told you before, when we came to Buchenwald, they took our whatever, they had nothing, you know, and they turned on the showers. We all thought we were going to get gas. And we saw the water running. We left.
So it was the American soldiers that came in.
American soldiers liberated Buchenwald. When they liberated, and I remember like it was yesterday, I was already 12 years old, so, you know, where they cried, terrible. They couldn't believe it. Now, I'll tell you something else. Maybe a few days later, they brought in people from surrounding towns, Germans, to the camp. They say they never existed, which was a big lie, because they took people from the camp to clean up their ruins where the houses were burned.
So they did know.
Oh, they knew, but they denied it.
Wow. What about your parents? What happened with your parents and your brother?
Toward the end of the war, like March, just before, because we were liberated in April, February, March, they started to eliminate a lot of people. So they took out my brother and several other hundreds of people. My brother and 2 other people escaped, and they hid in a barn. And we were told that the barn was set on fire, which was not true, because they escaped before the Germans came to burn the thing. So I didn't know. I knew it was 4 months before we were liberated and my brother was taken. 6 weeks before we were liberated, it took out 10,000 Jews into the woods and shot them for no reason. Just took them all in there, including my dad. But my dad would tell me, remember one thing, Barney. You have your mother's brother, your uncle is in Chicago. And he kept on drilling me every night. I would remember the address. The name I remember because he had my mother's maiden name, Salmon, you know. And so I said, okay, I'll dead. I already know. You don't have to, because he said, if I give you a piece of paper and they find it on you, I'll kill you. So he dropped me. And a week before I were liberated, took out 10,000 Jews from Buchenwald into the woods and shot all of them.
That was your dad and your mother?
Yeah. No, my mother. There were no females in Buchenwald, all males. When I was transferred to Buchenwald, my mother and my two sisters were left in Częstochowa in the labor camp because there were no females in Buchenwald.
So they survived?
So when we were transferred and liberated, a Jewish chaplain came over to me and said, would you like to go to the United States? I said, yeah, I would like to go. But he says, you got to go as an orphan. And I said to him, even at that age, I was 12 years old, 12 and a half years old, I said, I'm not going to go as an orphan because as far as I know, my mom is still alive, I think. So the Hayas was very involved. I told they kept record of all the, and they said, you have your parents. I said, my dad was exterminated. My brother, I don't know where he's at. I know that I left Częstochowa. My mom and my two sisters were there. There was also a camp. They had 3 camps. They were manufacturing ammunition, different shots. Anyway, so I said no. So I went to the Hayas. You know, I don't have to tell you what the Hayas is, right? Hebrew Immigration Aid Society. And I told them that they gave me money to buy a ticket to go to my hometown. I got to a city, Kielce, where the Polish people exterminated 90 Jews a week before I got there. And so there was no train going to my hometown. So I went to the station, I got a ticket. He says, you're going to wait 5 hours. So I'm waiting, what can I do, you know? I read a little paper. All of a sudden I hear they announce a train is coming from my hometown. I wasn't that smart. I figured, you know, I'll go on the tracks. Maybe somebody will meet me, see me, maybe I'll recognize them. So I went out on the track, and all of a sudden, I hear Beniek. Beniek is my Polish name. Beniek was my cousin. His mother and my mother were sisters. And so he was smuggling. It's the ham and it's all kind of food to different cities to sell on the black market. But he had a partner. So he said, listen, I just found my cousin. I got to take him back. I was going to go back to my hometown. He said, you can't go back to my hometown. I said, how come? So he proceeded to tell me, friends of my parents, friends of her parents, the mother was survived with 2 daughters. She wanted to reclaim her house. She finally did. And 2 weeks later, they found the mother and the 2 kids slashed to death. So the remaining Jews that remained in Demlin, they all moved out and they went to a city called Lublin. And Lublin is a very known town. If you speak to Orthodox Jews, they'll tell you. Most of the rabbis and they were raised in. So he told me, Barney, I have a worse thing to tell you. Your mother was told that you didn't survive Buchenwald.
Wow.
So my sister's mother-in-law lived in town with us, in the same area, not in the same building. So he walked over there and made arrangements and says, no problem. I went back there, and I stayed for a week, and my cousin Howard, he passed away 6 years ago, and he told my mother that he just found out that I survived and I should be here in a week. I was already in town.
Oh my gosh.
So when I came, and so I stayed with my brother-in-law's mother and his sisters. And a week later, my cousin Howard said, and Sarah, Barney's going to be in town the next day. He prepared her. And we got reunited. My one sister was married, and she moved to Israel when she got liberated because he had all his relatives in Israel. Mm-hmm. So I stayed the week that with his mother. Mm-hmm. And when I saw my mother, I said, where's my sister Ruja? Mm-hmm. She was the next oldest. She said she went to Israel because her husband had all the relatives there. So when I came back, I found my mother and finally got reunited. Wow. She was hysterical and all that stuff. What can I tell you? And then, I had to help as support. I only had my sister. My other sister went to...
I want to hear the story about your dad telling you, reminding you over and over and over, don't forget this address.
He kept on drilling me in Buchenwald. He said, remember, your mother's got a brother in Chicago. Right. This is his address. Every night he drilled me the address. I said, Dad, I already know the address. I'll remember it. So he said, fine. So when we got liberated, a Jewish chaplain approached me and said, would you like to go to the United States? I said, yes. But he said, you can only come as an orphan. And I said, you know what? I am not going as an orphan because as far as I know, my mother is still alive. I know my dad was shot. I don't know what happened to my brother. And my two sisters I knew were safe. Okay? So I said, I got to go back. He said, okay. Now, my sister, when I was married, I went to Israel, was pregnant in the camp in the second camp, not the first camp. And she gave birth to the baby, and the Jewish doctor had to kill the baby. Oh. There were no children allowed. Oh. So it was very tragic. She never got to see the baby.
Oh. Very tragic.
Very tragic, So when I told you when the chaplain approached me, I said, "No, I'm not going. I'm not an orphan. So I know my mother might be living, So I went back to Poland, and that's how I started in the black market. And 3 months later, my brother came and he helped me, and we provided. And the first thing that I earned money, I bought the things that my mother loved, pears, fruit, donuts,
wow.
Milk.
What a good son.
Yeah, good son, good son. And I worked, And then later on, things got so bad in Poland, very anti-Semitic, killing Jews. This city, they killed 4 Jews, another get the city. So we moved to a big city called Lodz, which was the second largest city in Poland. And we stayed there for about, I want to say 2 years maybe. Then my brother and I decided to leave for the United States. A Hayas person. She says, you'll go, a doctor in Norfolk, Virginia, adopted you. So that's how I came to the United States, and I stayed with my aunt, and my aunt said, you got to go to school. Well, she said, you know English? I said, Aunt Bessie, the only thing I know is yes, no, thank you, and please, and goodbye. She said, that's not enough.
Nope, you're going to school. We got to expand that vocabulary.
So she talked to the highest person, and they got me into a private school.
Very good. What I want to talk about now is, from your perspective, what you saw growing up. And because like I said, the Holocaust didn't happen overnight. It was planned. There was anti-Semitism. There were laws that were passed. There was boycotting of businesses, Jewish businesses. What I'd like for you to talk about now is, do you see the similarities today that you watched as a young boy and even as a young teenager unfolding even here in the United States of America? We talked earlier about education and Holocaust education, that they're trying to water down Holocaust education and make it make what happened in the Holocaust just like what happens with the Armenian genocide and racism in the country. It's almost as if they're trying to water down what happened to the Jews, when we can actually, if we put the Jews in their historical context over the last 3,300 years, the Jews were not only targeted for annihilation by Hitler, but it happened again with the pogroms in Europe. It happened with the Spanish and Portuguese Inquisition, with King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. It happened with Haman in Persia. It happened with Pharaoh in Egypt. But the world, or the educators, want to treat the Holocaust as if it's just part of all of it. What I'd like for you to share with our audience is, do you see a similarity in what led up to the Holocaust as to what we are witnessing, the anti-Semitism that we are again witnessing today?
The only thing I can tell you is I see it, but not as bad as it was in Poland. There's no comparison. I know it's anti-Semites, there are plenty, but not in Poland. I'll give you an example. When I came here, I didn't like the job with the deli, so my uncle was manager of a department store, and he said, "Barney, I got a job for you." I talked to the boss. You know what venetian blinds are, right? Blinds. They said, "You go to this thing, I'll drive you there, or take a bus, and you go to work." So I said, fine. I went there to work. My aunt would give me the directions, what streetcars would take, this and that. I found it. And they were making blinds.
Right.
So there were about 22 people working in the thing. And I heard them speak Polish. And in between them, and they said to him, in Polish, "I wonder if he's a Żyd." Żyd is a Jew. Okay? So the guy came over and started talking. He said, "Yes, a Żyd. Are you a Jew?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Too bad Hitler didn't kill you." I left the job. I didn't even call my aunt. I just remembered what streetcars I had to take to get back to my aunt. And I cried. I told my Uncle Aaron, "I'm not going back there. I got 22 people. They're all Polacks." And I said, "Too bad Hitler didn't kill you."
This is in Chicago.
In Chicago.
What year was this?
That had to be, let's see, I came here in 48, 49, somewhere in there, you know. And I remember, this is something on the side, I remember when my actual name in Poland was Barney Sidler. And she says, "Barney, here you got to spell." She talked to me in Yiddish. She spoke, for a Yankee, she spoke a fluent Yiddish. When I say, as much as I speak Yiddish, that's up to it. And she, and she says, "Barney, you got to spell, you got to change your name." That's why I went from Barney Sidler to Sidler. I wanted to remain,
So do you think that Holocaust education, experiencing the anti-Semitism and the hatred in Poland and even coming to the United States, you thought, I'm getting away from this anti-Semitism, I'm getting away from this evil, and you only to come to Chicago, a big city, American city, popular city, to have to face anti-Semitism once again. How do you feel about Holocaust education in the United States of America? Do you think that the Holocaust is important to teach our children or the next generation, and why?
Definitely, without any regard, everybody should listen and hear about the Holocaust, regardless whether you're Jewish or non-Jewish. They should know what transpired and how they eliminated 6 million Jews. Okay? And place in Poland, it was anti-Semitic in 1938. Big signs, do not buy by Jews in Polish, And it's a lot of people who didn't. I feel that every person should know what transpired during World War II, and especially in the Jewish community.
So you spent a lot of time talking about the Holocaust, teaching children, and you've spoken to children all over the country, children all over the world, in Europe as well. Why do you think it's important to reach these children with this story?
It's important from a standpoint because it's a history. They should know what transpired before they even were born, how the Jews were treated. And people should know what transpired, how many million Jews were exterminated. 6 million Jews, over 6 million Jews were exterminated. So people should know, as mostly, whether you're Jewish or Gentile, it's immaterial. They should know the background of what transpired to the Jews during World War II.
So a couple of years ago, back in 2018, we're here in Boca Raton, one of the high school principals at Spanish River High School, the principal, when asked by a parent, about what we're teaching our kids about the Holocaust here at Spanish River, and his response to her was, well, not everybody agrees about the Holocaust.
I read that article. I was there. I read about it. I was going to go over to the school and speak. I swear to you.
So tell me, what was your reaction when you heard that?
I just told you, when I read it and heard about it, I was willing to go over to the school and say, hey, whatever your principal told you is NG, no truth to it. And I said, you're talking to a child that survived the Holocaust. And I can tell you the whole story. And I do a lot of public speaking. I'm not exaggerating, I'm probably one of the more popular, because I'm the youngest. At my age, double eight, I'm the youngest.
So, did you ever think that you would hear this? That you would ever hear an educator, a principal, say such a thing?
No. Never in my life would I expect that. Especially, they heard about it. It's not, it was well known about the Holocaust. How could they deny when they eliminate 6 million Jews? And I don't know how many more gypsies. And, other nationalities. They had no regard for, unless you worked with them, if you were on the wrong side of the street, they eliminate you. They didn't want to have anything to do with you. I mean, it's a tragic thing, and I think it's very important that the kids know what transpired during World War II. They should be aware why they eliminated 6 million Jews. For no reason. I gotta tell you, most of the 3 million Jews were Polish Jews. You know that. Because Poland was so anti-Semitic. If the Germans would say, "We'll give you a pound of sugar," point out the Jews, they go find the Jews to get the sugar. Why? As young as I was, I remember that. Right. Big signs. I was first grade, I could read.
What about education? You know, in Germany or in Poland, there had to have come a time when you could no longer go to school. You were denied even education in Poland.
But that was prior to the war. I was only first grade, you know. At that time, I tell you, between you and I had a crush on the teacher. That's the truth, you know. But the teacher felt bad. She was Polish, but she had feelings, she had understanding, you know. But it was tough. It was a tough life for me. I'm not the only one. There are a lot of survivors that probably lived through the same thing or even worse, especially people that were in extermination camps. Now, one thing I want you to know, there was no extermination camps in Germany. All extermination camps were in Poland.
That's what I've heard. I find that very interesting.
No extermination camp. They had ovens, guess what? But they buried the bodies because they didn't have a place to bury them.
We're finding in education where Jews are being eliminated even from the textbooks, or the history of the Jews in America and the role that Jews played in our founding of this country. Too often we hear, for me, I hear Christians say, well, we're a Christian nation, and I correct them immediately and say, no, we are a Judeo-Christian nation. It's Jews and Christians that united together under the principles of the Torah and the Bible that created this incredible country. But now we're looking at history books who are eliminating the Jewish story or the Jewish involvement in our country, or the role that Jews have played throughout America's history, not just the founding, but even to today, and the benefits that we receive in our communities because of our Jewish community. Obviously, there's a new move afoot to eliminate the Jews, and we just had in California the ethnic studies model curriculum where they separated out the Jews, and they said this ethnic group is worthy of being talked about, and they're referring to the Arab Jews because they have darker skin. But the white Ashkenazi Jews, European Jews, they're not considered an ethnic minority. So they leave them out of the story. But we're seeing this over and over. How dangerous is that we're eliminating the Jewish involvement in our country and our nation's history? Why do you see that as a problem? Or do you see it as a problem?
I see it as a problem. They don't want to admit to the truth. I mean, they keep on telling it until some people, there are plenty of people out there that it sinks in and they believe it. I mean, more educated people from my standpoint probably say, they don't know what they're talking about. But if you have the narrow-minded people, you have as many narrow-minded here as you had in Europe. People think differently. I see it as a horrible thing. I mean, there are books. If you see, there's a hollow book. I got to show you before you guys leave. Mm-hmm. I took my children back to Poland. My 3 daughters. I took them down there. Took them to Auschwitz. Took them, it just went through. And I spoke them in Buchenwald. This is the 3rd time. This would have been the 4th time. And every time I go, I take either my grandchildren with me or I take my daughters with me, tell them what's inspired. So it's very sad. Or it's what's happening right now in the United States, even with the way they treat the Negroes. So that brings back a lot of memories of what happened to the Jews.
Do you think that we should, when we're talking about the issue of racism or xenophobia or all of these other Islamophobia, do you think that teaching about the Holocaust should be combined in teaching about those issues as well? Or do you think the Holocaust should stay as a separate situation in history?
The Holocaust is something special, something different. It happened. Hopefully will not happen again. Hopefully it's a one-time shot. But there's nothing wrong if the kids get educated or what happened during the time in the Holocaust. I will show you the 3 letters I got from the kids. I spoke to I speak in all the universities, but in Chicago, I have because you can't now allow, so they make tapes, and the kids come, they look at a computer and hear a speech. So 3 girls saw it, and each one sent me a letter.
That's fantastic. So you just said that the Holocaust was a different thing. Why was the Holocaust different from the Armenian genocide and racism? Why was it different? Why is it different?
It's a little bit. It was a special thing. Everything else is more. This is more specified to the religion of the Jews, the Jewish tradition.
So they were targeting. So the Holocaust was not just targeting the Jews because of their race, as Hitler had it, but also because of their faith, their religion.
Right.
And that's what makes the Holocaust different?
Different, no, not too much about it. Not too much about it. Not too much about it. You know, here, you look at me, I came here at the age of 15, 16. But look what I've accomplished. I raised a family. I went into being an electrician. I was told you dirty Jew many times.
And that was here in the United States.
In the United States.
What an amazing and enlightening conversation. I am grateful to have your participation on the program today. God bless you for your unrelenting work to bring the real history of the Holocaust to life for us. At a time when high school principals are denying that the Holocaust actually happened and the rise of global antisemitism, it is more critical than ever that we share Mr. Sidler's story, as well as the 6 million Jewish men, women, and children who perished at the hands of Nazis. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the facts. As PJTN Watchmen, we have a biblical mandate to warn our brethren about these biblical truths. God told the prophet Obadiah that in the last days, God would wipe out the descendants of Edom because they stood by while their brother Jacob was held in captivity and did nothing. How will God judge the church for standing by as the Nazis slaughtered the Jews? We cannot remain silent today. Silence is not an option, and in the words of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. In closing, don't forget to join us for next week's podcast as we continue this conversation. Please remember, as a watchman, you can share this podcast with your family and friends to alert them as well. God bless you, and thank you for all you do on behalf of our Jewish brethren, the State of Israel, and these United States. Thank you again for joining me on this edition of Proclaiming Justice. Please share this podcast with your family and friends. For more information about how you can get involved, please visit our website at pjtn.org. As a PJTN Watchman, you can help us keep up the fight to preserve our freedom for our children and their children for such a time as this.